Well, this is certainly the kind of thing that would cause Hezbollah to strike back. I mean, this was quite unprecedented. We're talking about 2,800 injuries right now, 200 critically wounded. We have blasts as far as Syria, and even the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was injured. So it certainly harkens the notion that there might be some kind of escalatory attack for this quite embarrassing, to be honest, attack on Hezbollah operatives throughout the country in Lebanon and in Syria. It's unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like this before. And as you mentioned, pagers are actually an old technology that Hezbollah operatives were encouraged to use because they are less hackable, less traceable. And so, we're all wondering sort of how Israel could have gotten into these pagers if they had infiltrated the supply chain, which would suggest even a kind of psychological operation on Hezbollah, where they will be highly suspicious of partners and members within their communities.
Pretty remarkable. Lebanon's telecom minister, Johnny Korm, suggesting the batteries on these devices likely overheated. He's calling it foul play, and Lebanon was quick to blame Israel, as we've been reporting. Would we expect Israel to take credit if that's in fact true?
I doubt Israel will take credit, but we do know that just yesterday they had accused Hezbollah of potentially assassinating a high-ranking Israeli military official. So this could have potentially been retaliation for that. But in all likelihood, this was a long way of planning something. These devices, this would have taken a great deal of intelligence work for months in advance.
Well, and it has been months now, Natasha, that we've been braced, waiting to see if Hezbollah was going to try to strike Israel directly, or Iran for that matter, for the assassination of Hezbollah commander earlier this summer. And then, of course, the subsequent killing of Hamas's former political leader in Tehran just days later. Is this likely to bring forward the timeline with which Iran or Hezbollah would consider that retaliatory strike actually taking shape? Because to this point, they've kept the world waiting.
It is possible, although, I mean, I think Hezbollah is significantly weakened right now. I mean, there are hundreds in hospitals right now. So physically and psychologically, they've been weakened as well. That said, again, this is quite an embarrassing attack on Hezbollah. And so they would be pushed, I think, to do something in response. What I would say is the most immediate fear for probably U.S. officials is that they were struggling to get a deal on the table between Lebanon and Israel to really demilitarize the border area there in return for some kind of economic package for Lebanon, which has been struggling for a long time. And I doubt that deal is going anywhere anytime soon.
There's just a headline crossing the terminal now from Agence France Presse that you mentioned that Iran's ambassador to Lebanon was wounded in the pager explosion. This all happens as Antony Blinken sets off on his 10th journey to the region since October 7th. He's going to be in Cairo, we understand. And as Israel sends the message to Amos Hochstein, representing the Biden administration, that there is only a military solution to the north, should Blinken be going to Israel on this trip? So far, he's not scheduled to.
So far, he is not scheduled to, and it's a good point that you make about Amos Hochstein, who just 24 hours ago was warning both Israel and Lebanon not to escalate the situation into a wider war. Blinken is scheduled to meet with primarily Egyptian and Qatari officials to get a new deal on the table to present to Hamas and Israel. But the administration is being very quiet about these talks now. They've sort of shifted strategies from being very, very public a couple of months ago about a potential ceasefire deal. And that tells me that they are, sort of not even cautiously optimistic, but they are hoping to be able to move forward on some kind of ceasefire deal. But it doesn't seem to be in the offing at the moment.
So, in other words, Natasha, the longer this takes, which it's been months and months and months now, the less likely it is that it ultimately comes to fruition. I just wonder, at what point, with a presidential election in the U.S. 49 days away, they just say, all right, well, this administration has given it their best shot, but it's going to be up to the next president now.
I think that's what Netanyahu's calculus is exactly. And I think it's been his calculus not just now, but maybe even a couple of months or 3 months ago, essentially waiting for the next U.S. administration. It's no surprise to anyone that Netanyahu traditionally, at least in the past decade, has been supporting Republican presidential nominees and likely doesn't want to give Kamala Harris a win prior to the election. And he also has his own domestic political issues to deal with. So as much as he can push this out, probably the better for him.
To what extent is our election, if at all, here in the U.S. playing into these negotiations? There's obviously a desire by some, including Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, to work with Donald Trump. And there are still some questions about the approach that Kamala Harris might take if she wins the White House. How do you see that dynamic?
Yeah, that's exactly my point. I think that Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want to give a Democratic nominee the win and would probably prefer a President Trump. And giving them a ceasefire is a win for this administration. But it's also a loss for him in the immediate term. And so I think he's going to continue to try to push this out as much as he possibly can, which is one of the reasons, frankly, the administration was prioritizing this Lebanon-Israel deal. But now that also seems to be in critical condition as well.
Well, and as we consider the different relationships here, Lebanon and Israel, obviously Hamas and Israel in the ongoing ceasefire negotiations, and Iran itself, it raises the question of the other countries in the Middle East. Joe made the point here that Antony Blinken, the Secretary of State, is specifically not going to Israel on this trip. He's instead going to Egypt, one of the mediators, along with Qatar. How should we be thinking about the evolution of their roles here if the U.S. is in question because of the election and the knowledge that the next president will not be Joe Biden?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. I mean, Egypt is being heavily rewarded for its active diplomacy. It's going to have to be instrumental in any kind of peace agreement or ceasefire deal, as one of the sticking points is the Philadelphia corridor, which is along the border of Gaza, the Gaza Strip, and Egypt. And the administration has also said that it will unlock a major aid deal to Egypt that it had been blocking because of human rights abuses. So Egypt has certainly, become more of a priority as these negotiations have gone on, in recognition that they will be very, very important moving forward.